Welcome to Books Podcast. Join us for quick, insightful book reviews and summaries that inspire and inform. Don't forget to subscribe and never miss an episode.
Sounds good to me.
Today we're taking a deep dive into The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt.
Huh?
It's a book that tackles a topic I think a lot of you are grappling with,
Mm-hmm.
the rising mental health challenges facing young people.
Right.
What's got me really intrigued is how Haidt connects this to changes in childhood experiences.
Interesting.
So buckle up because we're going to unpack what's changed and, more importantly, what we can do about it.
I think a lot of our listeners will be interested in that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
What really stood out to you when you first read The Anxious Generation?
Well, the thing that really sets this book apart, I think, is that Haidt doesn't just lay out the problem.
Right.
He digs deep into the root causes
I see.
and connects some pretty surprising dots.
Like what?
Well, he argues that a major shift occurred in the early 2010s
Okay.
from a play-based childhood to a phone-based childhood.
That's interesting.
And that the shift is directly correlated with the decline in teen mental health.
That's a pretty stark shift.
It is.
Can you paint a picture of what that play-based childhood looked like?
Future.
For those of us who maybe haven't thought about it in a while.
Yeah, think back to your own childhood.
Okay.
Maybe even before smartphones were ubiquitous.
Right.
Kids spent hours outdoors, engaging in unstructured play, interacting
I
face-to-face.
see.
These experiences, as Haidt argues, were crucial in developing resilience, social skills,
Yeah,
and emotional regulation.
makes sense.
They were the building blocks for navigating the complexities of life.
Okay, so we've traded tree climbing and impromptu games for TikTok trends and endless scrolling.
Yeah, pretty much.
I can see how that might be a problem, but it can't just be about screen time, right?
No, definitely not.
Haidt must delve deeper into how technology impacts this generation.
Absolutely. He meticulously lays out how factors like sleep deprivation, social media addiction, and even this fascinating concept called social contagion
Interesting.
are all feeding into this mental health crisis.
Sleep deprivation, social media, and social contagion.
Yeah,
That sounds a little ominous.
it can be.
Can we unpack those?
Sure.
Starting with sleep.
Okay.
I feel like we all know teens need their sleep,
Right.
but what makes it so crucial specifically for their mental well-being?
You're right. We often hear about how important sleep is.
Yeah.
But Haidt emphasizes just how detrimental sleep deprivation is to teens in particular.
Interesting.
The research he cites shows that lack of sleep during adolescence can impact everything.
Wow.
From mood and emotional regulation to academic performance and even the development of certain cognitive functions.
That's a lot.
It is. He highlights how the teenage brain is going through critical developmental stages, and sleep is essential for that process.
So it's not just about being grumpy and tired.
Yeah.
It's about their brains literally being hampered in their development.
Exactly.
Okay, that's pretty alarming.
Yeah.
But let's move on to social media addiction.
Okay.
I think we're all aware that social media can be addictive.
Mm-hmm.
But what's Haidt's take on how it specifically impacts teens?
Well, he goes beyond just saying it's addictive and explores how social media algorithms designed to keep you hooked exploit vulnerabilities in the teenage brain.
Okay.
Teenagers are wired for social connection and approval,
Right.
and these platforms offer that in a highly stimulating and often manipulative way.
I see.
The constant need for validation through likes and comments creates a feedback loop that can be really hard to break free from.
It's almost like a recipe for anxiety, isn't it?
It can be.
Constantly compare yourself to others, chasing those dopamine hits from likes and notifications.
Right.
No wonder so many teenagers are struggling.
It's tough.
Now, I'm still curious about this social contagion thing.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly does Haidt mean by that?
It's a really interesting concept. Essentially, it's about how behaviors and emotions, even negative ones, can spread through online communities.
Interesting.
Imagine a group of teenagers constantly sharing content about anxiety or depression.
Okay, yeah.
It can start to normalize those feelings,
I see.
even make them feel contagious.
Wow, that's a powerful idea.
It is.
So it's not just about individuals struggling with these issues. It's about how those anxieties can spread and become amplified within certain online spaces.
Right.
You
Exactly.
have an example of that from the book.
Yeah, he talks about how social media can create echo chambers where certain behaviors, even harmful ones like self-harm, can be normalized.
Oh, wow.
This can create a sense of validation and belonging, but it can also be incredibly dangerous, especially for vulnerable teens.
I can imagine.
One study he cites found that teens who were exposed to content about self-harm were more likely to engage in those behaviors themselves.
So it's like this vicious cycle where anxiety and negative behaviors are reinforced within these online communities.
Yeah, that's one way to think about it.
And it's particularly worrying because, as you mentioned earlier, girls seem to be more vulnerable to the pressures of social media.
Right.
What does Haidt say about that?
Well, Haidt highlights how the impact of the digital age differs between boys and girls.
Okay.
For girls, social media often becomes a relentless competition for validation based on appearance and popularity.
I see.
This constant pressure to conform to often unrealistic beauty standards can lead to heightened anxiety, depression, and even body image issues.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
The curated perfection we see on Instagram and TikTok must be amplified tenfold for teenage girls who are already navigating the complexities of self-image and identity.
It's definitely a factor.
It sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It can be.
And while boys aren't immune to these pressures, they tend to experience the digital world differently.
That's true.
They're more prone to withdrawing into video games and online worlds, which can lead to social isolation and a decline in those crucial face-to-face interactions.
Right.
So it's like two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
Girls grappling with this hypersocial, image-obsessed online world, while boys retreat further into isolation and disconnect from real-world relationships.
Exactly.
It paints a pretty bleak picture,
It does.
but I'm hoping Haidt offers some solutions. Where does he go from here? Does he offer any ways forward?
He does.
Okay, good.
And that's where the book shifts from analysis to action.
I like that.
He doesn't just leave us with a sense of doom and
Well,
gloom.
that's good.
Instead, he offers concrete steps we can take,
Right.
both individually and collectively,
Okay.
to address this crisis. It's not about demonizing technology altogether,
Right.
but about finding a healthier balance and reclaiming those aspects of childhood that foster resilience.
That makes sense. So what are some of the things we can actually do? Where does Haidt suggest we start?
One of his key recommendations is delaying smartphone access,
Right.
ideally until high school.
Interesting.
It's about giving kids a chance to develop those crucial social and emotional skills, those building blocks we talked about.
Right. Without the constant distractions and pressures of the digital world.
That makes a lot of sense, but I can already hear the pushback from parents.
Oh, yeah.
Won't kids feel left out if all their friends have smartphones and they don't? What about the argument that they need to learn how to navigate the digital world early on?
Those are valid concerns, and Haidt addresses them head on.
Good.
He acknowledges that it's a tough sell in today's hyper-connected world,
Yeah.
but he argues that the benefits of delaying smartphone access far outweigh the perceived drawbacks.
Okay.
He even cites Bill Gates, who, after reading the book, reflected on how valuable that unstructured playtime was in his own childhood
Really?
and how it contributed to his later success.
Wow. So it's not about sheltering kids from technology altogether,
No.
but about being intentional about when and how they're introduced to it,
Well-
and giving them the space to develop those foundational skills first.
Exactly.
What else does Haidt propose?
Alongside delaying smartphone access, he suggests restricting social media use for younger children.
Potentially even banning it outright for those under 16.
Wow.
The research is pretty clear that these platforms can be especially detrimental to young, developing minds.
It's a tough conversation to have,
It is.
especially with kids who are growing up in a world where social media is so ingrained in their lives.
For sure.
But it sounds like a conversation we need to be having if we truly care about their well-being.
Absolutely. And beyond limiting screen time, he emphasizes the importance of fostering free play, encouraging kids to get outside, engage in unstructured activities, and rediscover the joy of just messing around.
It's interesting that you bring up free play because we were just talking about how boys tend to withdraw into video games.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine unstructured play could be particularly beneficial for them.
Mm-hmm.
Does Haidt touch on that?
He does, and this is where his analysis of the differences between boys and girls really shines.
Okay.
He argues that while girls are more susceptible to the social pressures of online platforms, boys are more likely to lose themselves in the virtual worlds of video games, leading to social isolation and a decline in real-world interactions. Free play offers an antidote to both of these trends.
So how do we actually encourage more free play in a world that feels increasingly structured and overscheduled?
Haidt provides some really inspiring examples of communities that have successfully prioritized free play.
Okay.
He talks about schools that have implemented adventure
Well, I
playgrounds.
like that.
Essentially unstructured outdoor spaces where kids can create their own games and explore without adult intervention.
That sounds amazing. What kind of impact have they seen in those communities?
They've observed incredible benefits, not just in terms of kids' social and emotional well-being,
Good.
but also in their academic performance and overall development.
Interesting.
Kids are more engaged, more creative, and more resilient. It's a powerful testament to the importance of giving kids the freedom to explore and learn through play.
It sounds like a pretty radical shift
It can be.
from the hyper-scheduled, overstructured lives so many kids lead these days. What about parents who are worried about safety? I can imagine that letting kids roam free might feel risky in today's world.
That's a valid concern, and Haidt acknowledges the anxieties that many parents feel.
Yeah.
But he argues that by shielding children from every perceived danger, we're actually preventing them from developing the coping mechanisms and resilience they need to thrive in the real world.
So it's about finding that balance between protecting our kids and empowering them to navigate the world independently.
Exactly.
But it feels like such a huge cultural shift.
Yeah.
How do we move from these over-scheduled, tech-saturated lives to a world where free play is the norm?
That's where Haidt's concept of collective action problems comes into play.
Okay.
He explains how individual choices, like allowing young children unrestricted access to smartphones, can contribute to societal norms that become incredibly difficult to change.
Right.
We're all part of this system, and our choices influence the choices of others.
So it's not just about individual parents making different choices.
No.
It's about recognizing that this is a societal issue that requires a broader shift in thinking and behavior.
Exactly. It's about creating communities that value and prioritize free play,
Okay.
that recognize the importance of unstructured time and outdoor exploration. It's about shifting those societal norms and pushing back against the pressures of the digital age.
I love that he brings it back to this idea of collective action.
Mm-hmm.
It can feel overwhelming to think about tackling these issues as individuals.
Yeah,
But recognizing that we're all in this together is empowering.
absolutely.
Are there any other solutions that Haidt proposes, maybe on a larger scale?
He also advocates for policy changes and corporate accountability.
Okay.
He argues that we need stricter age restrictions for social media platforms
Right.
and tools that help families manage screen time more effectively.
So it's not just about parents putting down their own phones.
No.
It's about demanding that tech companies take more responsibility for the impact their platforms are having on young people. But are these companies really going to listen?
I don't know.
They're incredibly powerful, and their business models seem to rely on keeping us hooked.
It's true. It's a David and Goliath situation, but Haidt remains optimistic. He points to successful examples of communities that have pushed back against these trends
That's good.
and created environments where kids can thrive offline. He argues that change is possible, but it requires collective action, a willingness to challenge the status quo, and demand better for our children.
It's inspiring to hear that there are communities out there already making these changes,
Yes.
proving that it can be done.
Yeah.
It gives me hope that we can shift the tide, that we can create a world where kids are empowered to navigate the digital age without sacrificing their mental and emotional well-being.
And that's really the heart of Haidt's message, isn't it?
It is.
It's about recognizing the challenges, understanding the underlying causes, and then taking action both individually and collectively to create a healthier, more balanced future for the next generation.
It's a powerful message, and one that feels incredibly timely. I'm curious as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what's the one takeaway you hope listeners will walk away with? What's that nugget of wisdom that you think is most crucial for understanding and addressing this issue?
That's a great question.
I think for me, the most crucial takeaway is this.
Okay.
We're not just talking about screen time or social media addiction.
Right.
Those are symptoms of a deeper issue.
Yeah, I think so.
Haidt's book really opened my eyes to how changes in societal norms, parenting trends, and the rise of technology have all converged to create this perfect storm of anxiety for young people.
It really is kind of the perfect storm, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
It's a systemic problem, and it requires a systemic response.
I completely agree. What struck me was how Haidt doesn't just focus on individual solutions.
Right.
He connects the dots and shows how individual choices ripple outwards to impact the entire culture. He challenges us to think about the kind of world we're creating for the next generation and what role each of us plays in shaping that world.
That's such a powerful point.
Yeah.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed by the scale of these problems.
Absolutely.
But Haidt's book reminds us that we all have agency.
We do.
We can make different choices both individually and collectively to create a more supportive and resilient environment for young people.
And one of the most compelling aspects of his argument is the emphasis on free play.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's interesting that you bring that up.
Yeah.
It's not just a nostalgic yearning for simpler times.
Right.
He makes a strong case for how free play benefits not just individual children, but society as a whole.
I think so.
That's an interesting thought.
Yeah.
How does free play benefit society beyond just helping kids develop social and emotional skills?
Well, think about what happens during free play.
Okay.
Kids aren't just running around.
Right.
They're problem-solving, negotiating, collaborating, and experimenting.
I see.
They're learning to think creatively, to take risks, and to bounce back from setbacks. These are the skills we need as adults. Not just for personal success, but for building strong communities and tackling the complex challenges we face as a society.
It's like by nurturing those skills in childhood, we're investing in the future.
Yeah.
It's not just about kids' happiness. It's about creating a more adaptable, innovative, and resilient society.
Exactly. And Haidt doesn't shy away from the fact that this requires a cultural shift.
Right.
It's about challenging deeply ingrained norms and prioritizing free play as a necessity,
Yeah.
not a luxury. It's about designing communities that encourage outdoor exploration, that value unstructured time, and that empower kids to take ownership of their play experiences.
It's a big ask, but it feels so essential. I think this deep dive has left me feeling both challenged and inspired.
Yeah, me too.
Challenged by the magnitude of the issue, but also inspired by the possibility for change. What about you? What's the one message you hope listeners will carry with them from this conversation?
If I had to boil it down to one message, it would be this. We have a choice. We can continue down the path we're on, or we can choose to create a different future for the next generation.
I like that.
A future where technology serves us, not the other way around. A future where kids are empowered to explore, to play, and to develop their full potential, both online and offline. It won't be easy, but it's a future worth fighting for.
Beautifully said. And to our listeners, if you're looking for a deeper understanding of these issues, and more importantly, actionable steps you can take, I highly recommend picking up The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. It's a thought-provoking and inspiring read that will stay with you long after you've finished it.
I couldn't agree more. It's a book that has the potential to spark real change.
Thanks for listening to Books Podcast. Enjoy this episode. Subscribe and share with fellow book lovers. Got a book suggestion? Let us know.
Yeah.
Happy reading.